in. They pooled their money to buy an industrial dehydrator. It was meant to process the Xiangjuan mushrooms. My family had the largest harvest in the area. We put up most of the cash, but the machine ran nonstop for a week straight. Every other family in the village already had their batch processed. Only my family's harvest was left. The villagers didn't just want to sell their first batch at the best price. They wanted to ruin us. But then, their own Xiangjuan didn't dry properly and stayed damp. It was unsellable, and now they were facing a total financial loss. They wanted to hog the dehydrator to process their batch all over again. I just laughed and took control of the machine myself. If they wanted to use it again, they'd have to push a very different button with me. I looked at him and said, "You have to pay up, Uncle Sang. If my Xiangjuan doesn't go into that dehydrator right now, it's going to rot. The whole village is finished, so why the hell are you blocking my family? I get it, there's only one machine, and you wanted to be first to beat the market. But now the machine is just sitting in the yard gathering dust. Refusing to let my family use it? That's not happening." Uncle Sang stammered. "Now wait, Xiao Mo, it's not like that. Right now, the market for Xiangjuan mushrooms is peaking. But you have to understand, that's exactly the problem. Scarcity drives the price, and the first batch always sells for the most. The moment your 7 or 8 tons of mushrooms hit the market, supply is going to skyrocket and drown out the demand. The price will collapse, and even though your harvest is huge, you'll barely make enough per unit to keep your life comfortable. But the rest of us, we only have the harvest from our tiny plots. If we don't sell this first batch at a premium, how are we supposed to survive?" I saw through their lies. It was as clear as day. They weren't actually worried about the market price. They just wanted to dump their own ruined stock and let my family's entire harvest rot in the sun. And to think, I was the one who taught these villagers how to farm. I was the one who suggested buying the industrial dehydrator. When no one else could scrape the money together, my family put up the lion's share to buy that machine. Now, these ungrateful bastards were stabbing me in the back. Inside, I fumed. If I hadn't found them buyers and taught them the trade, would they even have a harvest today? Not a chance. You didn't have a single cent, and my family paid for it without a word. And that was it. Now, look at you, turning your backs just to leave us in the dust. Out on the street. If you think I'll let this slide, you're dead wrong. You're the ungrateful ones. Your family hogs the best 30 acres in town for Xiangjuan. You're just lining your own pockets with gold. But when the village needs streetlights or paved roads, has your family spent a dime? When other families do well, they actually help this village. What have you people ever done besides take? No one forced you to lend that money. You did it because you wanted to. Once it was bought, that machine became the property of the whole community. It belongs to the village now, and if you want to use it, you need permission from everyone. You insolent brat. You dare come here and make a scene? Go tell your know-it-all father that if he can't control his son, there are plenty of people here to teach him manners. The villagers' resentment toward my family had been simmering for a long time. The dehydrator was custom-made for Xiangjuan. Ordering another would take too long. Seeing the situation, I steeled my nerves and made a final decision. I called my cousin at a construction site and asked to borrow a dozen workers. That very same afternoon, I made my move. I arrived at the scene with my crew in tow. We marched straight into the village chief's courtyard, and we didn't come to talk. The chief's face twisted with pure, unadulterated rage. "What do you think you're doing?" he barked. "You really have the nerve to bring these thugs to my home? Are you trying to start a riot, or what?" I didn't even give him the satisfaction of a glance. I just gave the workers behind me a sharp look. I signaled them to grab the dehydrator right then and there. But the village chief wasn't going to let it happen. He rushed forward, blocking the way with his arms wide. My workers didn't hesitate for a single second. They stepped up and closed the distance. With one firm shove, they cleared the path. The chief lost his footing, slipped, and hit the dirt hard. No, you can't take it," he groaned from the ground. "That machine is the property of the entire village. Linimo, you can't just steal what belongs to us." "Cut the act," the chief barked. "This isn't a decision I made on my own. It's the decision of the entire village. You're turning everyone here against you." I didn't blink as I pulled a ledger out of my bag. I had all the paperwork ready for this exact moment. I slammed the documents onto the ground. They landed right at the village chief's feet. When we bought this machine, it cost $42,000 in total. My family paid $30,000 of that up front. As for the remaining $12,000, I'm paying it off right here, right now. This dehydrator belongs to my family. So stop with the village property nonsense. It's mine, and I'm the one calling the shots. Got it, Linimo, you arrogant brat. You don't have a single shred of decency. Realizing he couldn't stop me, the chief finally backed down. He just sat there on the ground, cursing my entire family under his breath. The workers I hired didn't waste a single second. They moved with professional precision. Every movement was quick and agile. They hauled the massive dehydrator right off the floor. They dragged it across the patio and toward the vehicle. The cargo truck was already idling at the entrance, waiting for us. Just as I was preparing to climb into the cab and leave this place behind, the village chief suddenly lunged forward. He ran in front of the truck, using his body to block our path. Fine, take the machine if you're so desperate. But you better think long and hard about what happens next. Think about the consequences, Linimo. I looked at him and thought, consequences? That's rich coming from you. In the future, don't you dare come back here crying and begging on your knees. Nobody in this village will ever look at you the same way again. No one is going to forgive you for this. I was done listening to his pathetic, empty threats. I turned around and gave a sharp nod to the two workers standing nearby. They understood immediately and stepped toward the door to clear the way. They jumped down from the truck and grabbed the village chief. They hauled him back toward the neighborhood. They shoved him into the patio and slammed the gate shut. "Listen to me carefully, Lin Mo," he screamed through the bars. "Everyone in this village has already finished drying their crops anyway." He was talking about the Xiangjun mushrooms. The harvest was over. "We don't even need that machine anymore, but you'll see, the day will come when you regret this." Once I finally had the dehydrator in my possession, I shifted into high gear to process my family's harvest. I couldn't afford to lose a single mushroom. Xiangjun are delicate, requiring constant monitoring of temperature and humidity. I couldn't let my guard down for even a second. My helpers and I went 3 straight nights without a wink of sleep. Finally, we managed to process the entire bottom batch. We saved the goods just before the Xiangjun started to spoil. During those days, the sound of villagers gossiping behind my back was constant. The village chief even led a mob to my house to cause a scene, demanding I face a public assembly. "Lin Mo, you must apologize to the entire village and reflect on your mistakes," they shouted. "The 12,000 you paid will be kept as a depreciation fee for using the machine. If you ever want to use it again, you'll have to pay an annual fee. Only then will we consider this matter settled." I looked at them and scoffed. "If you have time to come here and make a scene, why don't you worry about your own crops instead? Have any of you actually managed to sell a single Xiangjun mushroom yet?" I had noticed from the very beginning that the villagers were in such a rush that they hadn't dried their mushrooms properly, leaving the quality subpar. Because of that, they couldn't get a decent price from any buyer. If they wanted their Xiangjun to meet the market standards, they would have to process them all over again using my dehydrator. They weren't expecting me to throw their failure in their faces. The villagers just stared at each other, unable to find a single word to say back. They had no choice but to tuck their tails and leave with their heads hanging low. After that, they started waking up at the crack of dawn and working, staying out until late at night, trying to sell their Xiangjun at the market. But with those quality issues, nobody was willing to buy a single batch. Meanwhile, Boss Wong, the main buyer who always came from the city, the man I had worked with before, was starting to get worried. He feared that since I was processing the Xiangjun on my own, my technique might fail. He drove all the way from the city just to inspect the goods for himself. The day Boss Wong finally arrived, every villager in the area dropped what they were doing. They gathered stealthily outside my fence, craning their necks, just to catch a glimpse of what was happening inside. "Your air drying technique is excellent," Boss Wong noted. "Better than the processing plant. I'll give you the highest market price. 150 per kilo. I'm taking this entire batch right now." He was an old client who valued long-term loyalty, but I just smiled. I politely declined the bonus, telling him the standard market rate was more than enough. Boss Wong's grin only widened. Without a second of hesitation, he signed the purchase contract right there on the spot. After subtracting the costs of seeds, labor, and machinery, this single batch of Xiangjun mushrooms brought me a net profit of nearly 900,000. "Listen, I have a contract for 50 acres of land I want to give you. I'll give you the lowest lease rate possible, and you cover the costs. It doesn't matter how much you grow. I will buy every last bit of it at today's premium price. Let's make this a long-term partnership," he said. "That way, you'll have a stable income every single year." The villagers spying from outside my fence couldn't hold back anymore. Like a swarm of locusts, they came rushing into the courtyard. They surrounded Boss Wong, everyone shouting at once to sell him their own harvest. Faced with that much pressure, Boss Wong finally gave in. He reluctantly agreed to go and inspect their goods. But the moment he opened the very first sack, the atmosphere shifted. Boss Wong's expression darkened instantly. As he looked into that first bag of Xiangjun mushrooms, the look on Boss Wong's face turned grim and he started to walk away. He couldn't stop shaking his head. After a cold laugh, he headed toward his father's house. After checking 5 or 6 more sacks, he was done for the year. He had completely lost his patience. He made it clear that their lack of skill was an absolute joke. With a dismissive wave, he snapped, "This is trash. My factory doesn't accept such low quality." Even at a glance, it's obvious these mushrooms weren't processed correctly. The drying process was done all wrong too. Some parts are even damp and covered in mold. It's not that I don't want to buy them, but even if you took these to market, not a single person would pay for this trash. That's how it played out. But the villagers couldn't accept the truth. They stayed stubborn and defiant. They actually tried to justify their garbage product. "Our harvest is in perfect condition," they shouted. "Where exactly do you see any mold? It's just a little dusty because it hasn't been washed yet." They were just wasting everyone's time with their excuses. "A quick rinse and it'll be ready to go. It's still perfectly edible." But Boss Wong didn't flinch for a second. He wasn't about to waste his breath on them anymore. He ignored them completely, said his goodbyes, and drove off without a word. The moment the boss's car disappeared, the villagers' eyes locked onto me like glue. All that suppressed rage finally exploded as they pointed right at my face and screamed, "Lin Mo, what kind of lies did you feed that rich guy about us? Was it you who told him not to buy our goods? You're absolute trash for doing that. Do you really want to ruin everyone in this village?" They kept shouting, acting like I was the one who had betrayed them. They were throwing a massive tantrum over a mess they created themselves. They painted me as some heartless villain who had turned my back on my own. The villagers were like lit fuses, ready to explode at any second. They couldn't touch the boss, so they dumped all their frustration on me. The sheer volume of their screaming nearly brought the courtyard down. I looked at their faces, twisted and ugly with pure rage. But inside, I felt nothing but total, icy calm. In the past, their insults would have cut deep. But after hearing their constant mockery, I was finally over it. At the end of the day, I was the one making the money. To me, this crowd was nothing more than a pack of desperate clowns. I remembered someone saying I couldn't survive without their dryer. Well, they could rot for all I cared. I watched the idiotic looks on their faces as they realized I wasn't backing down. I couldn't help it. I let out a sharp, mocking laugh right in their faces. Over the next few days, the village held several emergency meetings. The only topic on the table was how to get that dryer back. Someone had gone down to the market to investigate. The Xiangjuan mushrooms weren't selling because the drying was amateur at best. The whole batch needed to be reprocessed with professional equipment. But even if they pooled their money, they couldn't afford a new machine. Besides, they were already out of time. Finding another processor meant spending even more on gas and transport. They were backed into a corner. After going in circles for hours, they reached the only possible conclusion. They had to beg Lin Mo for the use of my dryer. But there was a problem. Those moody bodyguards were still stationed at my door like stone statues. No matter how much they gritted their teeth, they didn't dare try to force their way in. They finally realized they had no choice but to bow their heads. Their attitude did a complete 180. Total submission. At dawn, the village chief and a dozen others were already waiting at my door with gifts of eggs and milk. They stood there from the first rooster crow until the sun began to set before I finally opened the door. The chief, wearing a smile that wrinkled his entire face, suddenly grabbed my hand. "Oh, my dear Lin Mo, the other day, we all just had a big misunderstanding. Your uncles and I, we've come to offer our sincerest apologies. We were all just hot-headed and let our words get away from us. Don't take it to heart, all right?" Behind him, the villagers were nodding their heads like puppets. One second they were cursing my name, and the next they were acting more like lapdogs than actual dogs. I knew perfectly well it wasn't because they couldn't tell right from wrong. This was just who they were to the core, bitter people who can't stand seeing others succeed. They're parasites and oppressors all at once, acting like schizophrenic clowns. Seeing that I wasn't reacting, the village chief forced himself to keep talking. "You guided us to plant these mushrooms, and we all remember that, and thank you. But now, the crop everyone worked so hard on simply won't sell. You're part of this community too. You can't just watch us go ruined, and you can't just watch your father and do nothing. That dryer. Just think of it as a donation to the village. Bring it out so we can all use it. Come on." As soon as he said it, Molly couldn't help but shoot him a look of pure disgust. Immediately, the chief started beating his chest in a display of fake sincerity. "Whatever anger you're holding on to, listen to me, take it all out on me. I'm your uncle. As the village chief, the blame is all mine anyway. But you can't just stand there and watch your aunts and uncles lose everything. They've been breaking their backs all year long." He knew exactly what he was doing with this performance. Emotional blackmail was his lethal weapon, the kind that would make even a dog feel guilty. But I wasn't buying a single word of his story. I looked at them and said, "If you want to use the dryer, fine." The moment they heard that, a wave of relief washed over them. Smug little grins started crawling onto their faces. That machine cost $42,000. My family put down $30,000 of our own money. The $12,000 I paid yesterday covered the rest. It's my private property, not a village asset. If you want to use my dryer, you'll pay me the full processing rate. If you're short even a single penny, don't even think about touching it." The chief snapped, shouting that I was worse than an animal. He yelled that I didn't even recognize my own family, but I just cut him off. "Stop with the emotional blackmail. If I'm really worse than an animal, and I don't care about anyone, then why would I care about being moral?" The village chief's smug smile vanished instantly. His face froze, turning pale and then a furious shade of red. For a long time, he couldn't find a single word to say. He stormed off with the rest of the villagers, and then the real plotting began. Back in the village, they held emergency meetings for 3 days and 3 nights. "As you've all seen," the chief told the crowd, "Lin Mo has reached an unbelievable level of shamelessness. Why should we have to sit here and put up with his arrogance? Instead of begging that brat, we're going to find ourselves a different processing plant in town, since he was the first one to play dirty and convince the buyers to skip our harvest. We're going to ruin his reputation for good. We'll make sure no one ever touches his crop again." But their little revenge plan didn't do a damn thing. Every single processing plant in town was already at max capacity for the season. The cost of drying had doubled overnight. The price ended up being even higher than using my processing machine. But those idiots still hadn't realized the hole they'd dug for themselves. They went straight to the market to spread lies and trash my name. But nobody paid them any attention. Everyone was too busy worrying about their own harvests. Who has time to meddle in someone else's drama when money is on the line? When they saw their mushrooms starting to mold and rot into the dirt, the villagers finally hit their breaking point, grumbling and complaining. They came crawling back to me with cash in their hands. Naturally, they put all the blame on the village chief. "Hey, Lin Mo, this was all the chief's idea," they pleaded. "He's the boss, so we were too scared to disobey him. We've always been on your side. Here's the full payment. Just please let us use the machine. I told the chief long ago that your family is educated and knows the world. If you do things a certain way, there must be a good reason for it. We're just a bunch of ignorant peasants. What do we know about these things? I just smiled, looking at their pathetic, two-faced expressions. I took the money without saying a single word. Suddenly, my front door was busier than the local market. Only the village chief stayed away, held back by his own stubborn pride. He paced at the village entrance, dying of anxiety but refusing to give in. Instead, he went to cry and moan to my parents. He wanted the old folks to convince me to back down. That day, my father called me home for a specific reason. Standing there in front of my brother and sister-in-law, he spoke to me in a submissive, pleading voice. Lin-mo, I know they treated you terribly before, but we all live in the same village. The chief came to beg with his head bowed. They're just old people now. You're still young, so why keep fighting with them like this? We don't need to see them suffer. Just let it go so they'll leave us in peace. Just leave it at that. Just as I was about to speak, my cousin lost his temper. He cut in, Uncle, if I hadn't stayed behind to watch over the workers, who knows what they would have done to this house? Lin-mo and I worked ourselves to the bone to earn this. Why should we let these people off so easily? Our money doesn't grow on trees, and I'm not about to let them take advantage of us. Why should we lift a finger to help that bunch of ungrateful bastards? My cousin looked at me and said, Imo, your brother and I have your back. Do what you have to do. If it all goes to hell, your family is behind you. Hearing that, every last bit of doubt I had vanished. The dehydrator ran nonstop for 7 days and 7 nights. We finally finished reprocessing all the Xiangjuan mushrooms from the village. But the villagers had wasted too much time being stubborn. The market was already saturated with mushrooms, and the price had plummeted by half. To make matters worse, the quality of their product was already bottom tier. Selling them at a decent price was now officially impossible. That's when the panic really set in for them. They came back to me, sobbing and begging me to contact Boss Juan. They wanted him to buy their worthless stock as a personal favor to me. But I thought, why on earth would I waste such a massive favor on people like them? Since I refused to give them a straight answer, they took it a step further. The villagers swarmed my house, wailing at the top of their lungs. They pleaded with me over and over, desperate for a way out. They were crying oceans of fake tears. Some even brought their elderly parents and children to kneel in the dirt before me. I worried they'd lose their minds if I didn't give them something, so I finally spoke up. I'll help you contact Boss Wong, but whether he buys or not is your problem, not mine. The moment they heard I was willing to make the call, they finally stopped harassing me. But before I could even pick up the phone, the village chief suddenly announced he had found his own buyer. He claimed this man would take every single Xiangjuan mushroom in the village. In an instant, the villagers completely forgot they had just been begging for my help. Even though the price this new buyer offered was so low, it was practically a gift. The villagers celebrated the news with a massive round of applause. They acted like they'd just won the lottery. Not a single person had actually seen this buyer's face, and not a single person had seen a signed contract. But as long as the village chief was the one organizing it, they were more than grateful to follow along blindly. Because of this miracle, the village chief's reputation skyrocketed. He was seen once again as the leader who always looked out for his people, the respected hero who made the village's problems his own personal responsibility. Meanwhile, I watched as my own reputation was dragged through the mud once more. In their eyes, I had become a villain worse than a stray animal. Just as I was preparing to transport my own Xiangjuan mushrooms to Boss Wong, Boss Wong had barely reached the village entrance in his truck. A mob of villagers immediately swarmed him, blocking his path. They stood their ground, refusing to let him pass. Their hostility was boiling over, like they were out for blood. The air was filled with screams and demonic shouting. The insults were so loud, I thought the roofs might collapse. They had unleashed a fury unlike anything I'd seen before. It was all because of the poison the village chief had fed them. He told them the new buyer didn't require any machine processing for the mushrooms. He claimed my insistence on redrying them was nothing but a scam. A pathetic excuse to cheat them out of their own money. Lin-mo is a thief. He's robbing us blind, they screamed. You bastard. The buyer said the mushrooms were perfect. They never needed to be processed in the first place. You were the one trying to screw us over from the start. Don't expect any sympathy from us now. You're a traitor and a cheat. Don't even try to deny it. If the chief hadn't told us the truth, we'd still be your puppets. You're a monster, Lin-mo. You'd still be playing us for fools right now if you could. You're nothing but a parasite. Stop wasting your time talking to him. Give us back the money you stole from us right now. We all grew up in the same village. So how could your family raise someone like you? You're absolutely subhuman. Oh, so you like collecting fees, do you? Well, the village chief built this road. Since you're using it, you have to pay a toll. Your house sits on village land too, so you'd better start paying rent if you want to stay. Without saying another word, I pulled out my phone and called the police. When the officers finally arrived, the villagers didn't stop. They kept right on screaming. They were used to being the bullies of this valley. They always got their way, and they thought they were untouchable. They actually believed the police wouldn't be able to do a single thing to them, other than try to talk everyone down. But the second they saw the batons and the pepper spray, their fake courage vanished instantly. The village chief stepped forward and cried, "Officers, please. You have to see things for what they really are. Don't believe a word he says." Lin Mo took over our village's public property. He kept it for himself and then had the nerve to extort us. He threatened us, saying we had to pay just to use the mushroom dryer. What's the difference between this guy and a common bandit? As chief, it's my duty to protect the rights of my people. The officer looked at him and said, "He bought the machine with his own money. Charging you to use his private property is perfectly legal. What isn't legal is what you're doing right now. You smashed his truck and blocked the road. That's a criminal offense. And for the record, the government built this road, not the village chief." The chief and the main riders were hauled off to the station right then and there. The rest of the villagers were lined up for questioning. I finally managed to get my cargo out of the village. I felt like I had just escaped a den of wolves. I drove straight to deliver the mushrooms to Boss Wong. I was running late, but I wasn't going to let them stop me. When I arrived, Boss Wong asked me why I was so late. After I told him the whole story, he was furious at the injustice I had suffered. He told me he would definitely help me get even. I didn't think much of the big boss's words at the time. I knew that he and those villagers lived in completely different worlds. After the new year, I was set to take over Boss Wong's dozens of acres. I planned to rent out my family's land and cut all ties with the village. I stayed in the city and didn't go back to the village for a while. I only returned after the new year to pack my things and move out for good. The moment I stepped back, I realized the villagers' attitude had changed forever. The way they looked at me was completely different now. They still had that familiar hint of contempt in their eyes, but there was something else hidden deep inside them. The fear buried in the back of their gaze was so real that it was impossible to ignore. The second they caught sight of me, it was like a mouse running into a cat. Later on, I found out exactly what had happened while I was gone. I learned what happened after the villagers put on that little show and trashed the truck. The police had already arrested the main agitators who started the riot. The rest of the village thought that was the end of it. They figured the matter was settled. They expected to keep doing whatever they wanted with their usual arrogance, but they didn't count on what happened the moment the police left the village. Another group of people arrived. Compared to the workers I had brought before, these men were different, tanned, rough, and dangerous. Their presence was imposing and much harder to ignore. They were nothing but thugs and lowlifes. The second they stepped into the village, they started asking questions. They went straight for the village chief to cause a scene. To be fair, they didn't actually do anything illegal or violent. They didn't pull out knives or guns, and they didn't burn anything down. They simply came to deliver a message. They told the villagers every truth I never had the chance to say myself. Every single detail. They laid it all out, word for word. And they made sure every neighbor heard it. "Everyone, gather around. We aren't here to start a fight today. We aren't here to hit anyone. We just came to tell you the cold, hard truth. We're here to get justice for Lin Mo, the man you all judged so unfairly." The police chief had already left the scene. "Your village chief humiliated him, and you all just went along with it." "What truth?" one villager shouted. "The chief is a good man. He even paid for the new road out of his own pocket. He's a saint. Neighbors, look at this cement. That hypocrite has played you all for fools, and he did it dirty. There isn't a single good bone in that man's body. The whole thing is just an act. You really think he paid for that cement road at the entrance of the village? You think that money came from his personal savings? Not a chance. Every cent for that road came from a government grant, from start to finish. He didn't contribute a single penny of his own money." "That can't be," a woman cried. "I saw him at the construction site every day, supervising everything. How can you say he had nothing to do with it?" While they were building that road, the chief spent his time sighing and complaining bitterly to us. He told anyone who would listen that the government funds weren't enough. He claimed he had spent every last bit of his life savings to finish it. He even claimed it had cost him an exhausting amount of effort. "If you don't believe me, then come with me. Follow me to the chief's house and see the truth for yourselves." The crowd marched in a massive wave toward the chief's home. Those men had been left with absolutely nothing. They swarmed the house like a hive of bees and started tearing it apart. They went through everything until I found a hidden ledger. It was filled with official documents, fake contracts, and clear proof that he was planning to skip town, all while pocketing every cent of the money. The chief couldn't do a single thing to stop them. He realized he was cornered. He dropped to his knees and began to beg for his life. "Please, everyone, have mercy. I have a family, elderly parents, and young children. Please, let me live. From now on, I'll do whatever you say." "You have the nerve to beg for your life now? Where was this fear when you were robbing us?" Did he ever think about how the others would survive when he stole their money? He used emotional blackmail back then, acting like his life was on the line. Every single family in this village fell for it. We gave him our money voluntarily just to show our gratitude. "Give us back our money right now," the crowd roared. I watched as the gratitude turned into pure rage. The villagers swarmed him and began to strike. They beat the chief until he was screaming in agony. He was in pain, but he didn't dare fight back. He wouldn't even dream of calling the police. He was terrified that all his dirty laundry would be aired out. So he just curled into a ball on the floor and took the beating. For the next month, the chief stayed locked inside his house. He was absolutely paralyzed with fear. He spent every second praying for mercy, thinking that at any moment he'd hear those footsteps. Was it the police coming to arrest him for his crimes? Or were those thugs coming back to give him another beating? That was the moment he finally snapped completely. He grabbed a mountain of evidence against himself. Then he stumbled all the way to the police station. "I'm here to turn myself in," he shouted. "I'll confess to everything. I stole the money from the villagers. And I conspired with outsiders to scam the whole town. Here's the proof. Arrest me." Nobody knew exactly how many years he was sentenced to. All we knew was that when his wife heard the news, she packed her bags that same night and left with their son. She left his elderly mother all alone in the village, with no one left to care for her. Shortly after the chief's scandal broke, the buyer sent his men to return all the Xiangjuan mushrooms. They brought every single crate back intact, and then they refused to pay a single cent of what they had originally promised. The villagers were desperate and didn't know what to do. A crowd blocked the entrance to the buyer's warehouse, weeping in agony. "Please, boss, help us out. The whole village broke their backs since dawn to grow this. If you don't buy it, a whole year of our hard work will be for nothing. That's right, we'll even take less money. Just please, take the goods and give us a chance to survive. Save your sob stories." Boss 1 made it clear, anyone who buys from you is asking for trouble. He told the villagers to get lost and go back to their crumbling homes. "You brought these problems on yourselves with your shady deals. So deal with it now. Don't come back here bothering us." After that, no one else dared to even answer our calls. They refused to buy the Xiangjuan mushrooms, and they wouldn't touch any other vegetables from the village, no matter how high the quality. The old village chief was gone for good. The villagers looked at the situation with deep suspicion, especially when it came to the new, young chief. They didn't believe for a second that he could pull them out of this losing streak. The village had effectively lost its leader. On their own initiative, the villagers started holding massive meetings at the local school. These town halls would drag on for days at a time, but it never occurred to them to actually rely on themselves. None of them wanted to wake up early to sell their own goods at the market. They just wanted to sit in the village committee room, fighting and blaming each other. I watched all of this unfold, and I was honestly speechless. The sight of it left me feeling completely sick at heart. I worked day and night without a single break, doing the impossible, and I finally got the village enrolled in the government poverty relief program. The government wasn't the only one stepping up to help us out. It didn't take long for them to send over a shipment of high-quality piglets. I gathered every single villager together for a specific reason. With all the patience in the world, I asked them to settle in and listen. I taught them step by step how to raise the pigs and prevent diseases. But of course, I should have known better. The villagers were thrilled as they hauled the piglets back to their homes. But shortly after, I took a walk around to check on the pens. Some of them couldn't even control their own basic impulses. They had slaughtered the piglets just to have a quick meal. Others, thinking they were being clever, sold the piglets off to the first buyer they could find, just so they could waste the cash on useless junk. In just a few days, there wasn't a single piglet left in the village. And then, the villagers did it again. They marched right back to the village committee to complain. They came to demand more piglets from their young boss. Boss, we're all out of piglets. You have to get us another batch. We promise we'll actually take care of them this time. We'll make it work, we swear." "Boss, last time was our fault. We'll actually listen to you now. Please, just one more shipment." I was drowning in frustration and rage, but I felt trapped. But when I looked into their eyes and saw that flicker of hope, looking at those desperate villagers, my heart softened, and I placed the order for a second batch. I handed the piglets over to them, one by one, and with every single handoff, I gave them the same warning. "Listen to me, and listen well. Regarding these piglets, don't you dare slaughter them for a meal or sell them off behind my back. Take care of them. If you raise them right, you can breed them or sell them for a fortune later. That is how you build a real income, year after year. Breeding them is the only long-term solution." But for these villagers, my words went in one ear and out the other. The moment they had those piglets in their hands, their greed took over. The ones they wanted to eat, they slaughtered immediately, and the ones they wanted to sell, they sold off for quick cash, just like that. It was a carbon copy of the last disaster, and when I found out, I was shaking with rage. I was completely heartbroken, and I decided I was done with them and their fate. The village spiraled into total chaos, and I stopped helping everyone. Nobody wanted to put in the actual work anymore. The younger generation packed their bags and left to find jobs elsewhere. The elderly who stayed behind barely survived on the scraps of aid they received. The fields that were once fertile were now abandoned and cursed. Drowning in poverty, the villagers lost their hope and their livelihoods. They started brawling over the smallest, stupidest things. The entire village felt dead, as silent as if no one had ever lived there. Years passed by, and then there was me, Linemo. I had become a famous figure far beyond the village. I was now a massive producer of mushrooms and rugs. My name was known everywhere. I managed over 40,000 acres of land. My business was booming, moving forward with unstoppable momentum. I still had a good heart, so I decided to take the initiative. I reached out to help the struggling farmers in the neighboring villages with mushroom cultivation. I didn't just teach them the Xianghun method. I gave them the cultivation techniques for free. I even provided them with the startup capital they needed. I made sure they could afford the highest quality materials to ensure a perfect harvest every time. And to top it all off, I guaranteed their income by personally buying back their entire production. "Mr. Lin," they would say, bowing deeply, "truly, we cannot thank you enough. If you hadn't taught us for free and bought our crops, we never would have escaped this life of poverty." I just smiled and told them, "No need for thanks. You're the ones doing the hard work. You earned this good life through your own grit. Keep farming like this, and things will only get better." The people in those villages were incredibly hardworking. By following my lead and pouring their souls into the work, it only took a few short years for everything to change. Every family built new houses and established themselves in the city. They even bought their own cars. Their lives were finally prosperous and full of joy. One day, I was in my office reviewing the latest cultivation reports. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was the old accountant from my former village. The voice on the other end sounded frail and weak. "Linimo, it's me. I'm calling just to tell you. Our old village is completely finished. The fields are abandoned, and the weeds are taller than the people. The young people left a long time ago. Only a few of us old-timers are left here now. Every day we just sit at home, waiting for a tiny government handout, just to survive. I don't know how much longer we can hold on." I gripped the phone tightly, staying silent the entire time. I didn't say a single word, my face showing no emotion at all. Regardless of the cost, I hung up the phone and called for my assistant. "Bring me the list of villages we currently support, and cross out the name of my old village." "Are you sure, Mr. Lin? It is your hometown, after all. Don't you want to take a moment to reconsider?" I shook my head, knowing full well that the poverty of certain places is never just a matter of bad luck or an unfair fate. It's a choice. They chose laziness. They chose to complain. They chose to give up and let themselves hit rock bottom. In the end, they must face